didn't sound like Andy. The Coles, thank you so much.
Is that a
Bill,
shot
thank
at
you.
me?
Yeah. So, Bill, if you're Andy's deputy, that would make you Barney, right?
Yes.
So just call Bill Barney for the rest of the day. Yeah, be nice, Arlene, and we'll call you Aunt B. So, living the science of mind is a not only a wonderful idea, it's a wonderful book that I would hope you have in your library. It's a series, a compilation of articles that Dr. Holmes wrote over the years, mostly in Science of Mind magazine. They're 3-4 pages each, and each takes a topic of something that, you know, may be going on in your life. So, and these quotes aren't necessarily from that book, but they're generally from the theme. I just, you know. So when someone asked him what our teaching was, and again, the terms science of mind and religious science are used pretty interchangeably, he said religious science is a synthesis of laws of science, opinions of philosophy, and revelations of religion applied to human needs, and the aspirations of man. Now, we could make that more gender neutral now. I probably should have done that, but I was in a hurry. But, you know, in general, we look to science. He mentioned science first, because he understood that to really be effective in the world, a spiritual teaching has to be practical. It has to be something you can use. It has to be reality-based. And although reality is not quite as solid as we think it is, there are certain elements that we need to understand in terms of how our world works. Because when we get into the realm where we go beyond what the law will support, which is what reality ultimately is, whatever the law will support, then we're into the realm of what's generally termed magical thinking. And magical thinking can feel good. It can also scare the hell out of you. But it doesn't lead you to a better connection with reality. So he recognized the teaching needed to be practical. He said one of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are too likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. As a matter of fact, we can know only as much as we can prove by demonstration. So you might say from that, what I know and what you would know in your own life, what I know in my own life is what I already have, what I've already demonstrated, what has shown up in terms of my experience, in terms of my relationships, my health, all of the things I've done, all of the things I've observed, and really then I interpret those things, and that determines how I see reality. That's all I can really say I know. Everything else I can envision much more, or I can envision different. I can also envision much less. But that's theory. Not to say you can't get to where the theory is, but in terms of what I actually know, it's limited to my own experience. You know, the thought experiment you might use if I were to say, has anyone here that's never been to Detroit, Michigan? Anyone that's never been there? Okay. And yet, Linda, you've never been there. Yet you probably believe that Detroit exists. Right. Although you've never been there. No. Okay. But if someone said, hey, here's a free airline ticket to Detroit and free hotel and so forth, you'd probably get on the plane. Maybe not. Maybe I should have said Cancun, right? Yeah. Detroit, maybe not. Poor example. But you know, in other words, you wouldn't say, I'm not getting on the plane. That place doesn't exist. But you've never really been there, so you don't really know Detroit. You just have a belief that it exists, and the belief is strong enough to get you maybe to get on a plane if the circumstances were correct. Who here has been to Detroit? Okay, would you help her out, please? Because, well, Dorianne's been there, I know, and so Dorianne has been to Detroit, so she has a knowledge of what Detroit is like, although not all of Detroit. She's just had the experience of being there for whatever time she was there. But that's a demonstration. See, the demonstration is something that's already occurred. So you can say she knows more about Detroit than someone that's never been there, But if we put 4 or 5 of you that have been to Detroit into a conversation, you might see that your experience of that place were very different. You each saw a part of it and then interpreted it according to your own belief system. So that's kind of how reality works, our experience of reality anyway. Now, when he says too much theory and too little practice, that means we tend to talk about the teaching more than we tend to do the work, more than we tend to do our spiritual practices, more than we tend to try to take dominion over our conscious mind as we go through the day and our feelings, so that we're preparing ourselves to be in the best space possible to encounter whatever it is we encounter, and also to draw in a better experience of life. So a lot of times we spend a lot of times, I know people that have been in this teaching for a long time, and they can quote chapter and verse, but their lives are kind of a mess. And you say, well, how can that be? And the answer is too much theory and too little practice. In fact, he never said too much practice and too little theory. So if you're going to err on the side of practice. See, that's the key. The key is the practice. The key is, am I paying attention? Am I doing my work? Am I training my mind to be the best receptor to what is in the world around me? And to interpret it in such a way that I am uplifting rather than pulling down. The law he talks about here we call principle or the law. It's simply the way the universe works. He said, this law we did not create. This law we cannot change. We can use it correctly only as we understand and use it according to its nature. Hence it follows that if we believe that it will not work, it really works by appearing to not work. This is kind of a long-winded way of saying it's done unto you as you believe. You see. Because one of the things, early in his earliest writings, back in the 19-teens, in Creative Mind and Success, which were Dr. Holmes' first 2 books, he said, in order to experience a higher order of being, you have to first believe it's possible. Because that belief you might say is the entryway or the gateway into a larger realm of possibility. Not to say we give up any sense of what I would call a healthy skepticism. But if we refuse to see, we say, oh, this can't possibly work. And then we'll have that experience where it doesn't work, and it worked by appearing not to work. It's kind of interesting. So we have to have, our vision statement is loving hearts and open minds. We have to have an open mind, which means we're at least willing to explore possibilities without closing down our willingness to experience. And many of us were raised to be very doubtful, to see conspiracies everywhere. Don't trust anybody. And that may have seemed wise at some point in your life, or it may still seem wise, but the problem with that is, as within, so without. One of the oldest metaphysical terms that we're aware of, as within, so without, as above, so below. And what that means is that your external experience of life will be according to your internal experience of life. And that the higher orders of your being, your conscious process, creates and directs the lower order of being, which is your subconscious process. It says in the Bible, in the Old Testament, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We experience the world that we've already decided is so before we experience it. Now that may seem to contradict our sensory experience of reality. Our senses would tell us, and the combination of our senses and most of our process being unconscious or subconscious, would tell us that things happen out here and we react or respond to them. That I just got a cold, or the flu, or Ebola, to be topical. And I don't know where I came from. It had nothing to do with me. It must have just infiltrated my system somewhere and attacked me. And I'm just an innocent bystander. But what most of us weren't raised to understand is that in order for anything to become part of us, to penetrate us, if you will, to be in our sphere of experience, we have to create a receptivity to that somehow. Not so much in specificity, but a general receptivity. So what can cause me to get a cold? Well, there's a virus, the virus gets in there, but the virus is already there. What causes me to get the cold is me thinking in a way that's depressive, let's say, or that causes my immune system to be depressed, and that little virus that was getting bounced away all of a sudden sneaks through. Because I created receptivity to that what I would call that negative experience by the way I was thinking maybe 5 or 6 days before that. It's not that I was thinking, gee, I hope I don't get a cold, although that'll do it too. The combination of the receptivity I create within and the availability of it out in the world will tend to create that attraction. It has to be both. I have to have the receptivity and it has to be around. If I'm sitting here thinking, I hope I don't get Ebola, it's very, 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 very unlikely that I would get it because it's not around here. But there are people panicking, because it's magical thinking. That what's happening over there must be happening to me. Kind of interesting. See, that's not a reality-based relationship to feel that way. Well, somebody got it. Yeah, I know. Somebody gets something every day, There have been anyway, I'm not going to get into that. The way the law works, the law is impersonal. It's impersonal. It doesn't make exceptions. It doesn't favor one over another. It simply causes the universe to react to you according to the receptive field you set up within and around yourself. So what I'm receptive to, if it's in my environment, will tend to come to me. If I'm receptive to a lot of money and there's a lot of money in my environment, it'll tend to come to me. If I'm receptive to wonderful, loving relationships and there are people in my environment who are capable of wonderful, loving relationships, that will come to me. That's the key. See, it's not that the world happens to us and then we react. It's that we invite the world in a certain way that we're usually not aware of. And then we respond. So the cause is not out here. The cause is always within. Cause and effect. The law works perfectly all the time. So I don't have to worry about, and by the way, it's not like the laws they make up in Sacramento. You can't break them or ignore it. It's like gravity. You're subject to gravity. You can't break the law of gravity. Even an airplane doesn't break the law of gravity. It uses the law of gravity through greater knowledge of the law to create lift. Okay? So you can think of the law of mind, this law or principle that we talk about, as like gravity. You can't break it. The more you learn about it, though, the more effectively you can use it. So one good stepping stone to how to use the law is, if it's in my life, I invited it in. That's the law. And it's not about trying to push it out. It's about, what am I going to invite in instead? I have to begin with the invitation. This is really long. Dr. Holmes said, in the science of mind, we learn that persistent, constructive thought is the greatest power known and the most effective. I'm going to read that again. In the science of mind, we learn that persistent, constructive thought is the greatest power known and the most effective. If the visible effect in our lives is not what it should be, if we are unhappy, sick, and poverty-stricken, we know the remedy. The truth is always the remedy. And the truth is that the law of liberty is the only real law. When we reverse the process of thought, the effect will be reversed. Persistent constructive thought is the greatest power. So if you were to take your last 7 days, and we got an app for your phone that would map out the persistence and constructiveness of your thought, and if it were really, really, really persistently constructive, the screen would turn green, and if it weren't, the screen would turn black. What color would your screen be? And probably for most of it, kind of a blackish green, maybe, But really, I mean, if you could kind of get a sense of measurement, because measurement is important. Understanding what's going on is important. And if I were to measure the quality of my thought based on the feeling tone within my being, and I would say which thoughts were kind of uplifting me and positive and leading me towards something greater, and which thoughts were kind of rumination and negative, or even being really, really, really negative and angry and depressed. And then if I were to put those on a scale, which way would I lean in general? What would be my general attitude toward life? And part of that is what kind of environments am I putting myself into? And what am I taking away from those environments? If I notice that my tendency of thought tends to be negative and destructive, am I consciously trying to put myself in places where there will be positive influences on me? Or am I turning on cable news? Not much positive there, right? But I might miss something. If anything really big happens, you'll know about it, You know what I mean? But see, what we tend to do is we tend to feed whatever the existing consciousness is, and we do it automatically and unconsciously. When we're largely in the destructive thought mode, we tend to feed more of it into ourselves, to the point where we will resent and reject someone who appears to be positive as being they're just crazy. They don't know how bad things are. It's interesting. We have to pay attention, see? We have to bring so much of it to the conscious level so we're aware of what are the dynamics so that we can know what we need to do. I once counseled a person, this is decades ago, who, lots of issues in life. Financial, relationship, health. It was depressing just to sit and listen to it. And I felt very compassionate for her. And I said to her at one point, after hearing this litany of problems, have you ever considered that maybe your state of mind isn't very positive? And she goes, oh no, I'm the most positive person I know. And I said, meet some new people. Jesus. You can't be positive and have negative experiences over and over and over. You just can't do it. You can't think healthy thoughts and be unhealthy. That's the law. As within, so without. As above, so below. If you try to see your experience of life as disconnected from the consciousness you've been creating, you're on the wrong track. There are no answers there that will work. We have to do the work. We should be able to look at a wrong condition with the knowledge that we can change it. The realization that we have this ability must be gained by the application of our knowledge. What's a wrong condition? Anything you don't like. It's not about putting judgment on things. If you don't like it, it's a wrong condition. If it's not something you would want in your experience, it's a wrong condition. And the way to change it is not to push it out or resist it or fight against it. The way to change it is simply to think in another direction. I say simply, it is simple. It's not often easy because of the emotional context of it. But it's simple. Simple idea. You don't like what's happening, think differently. If you keep going in the direction you're going to get where you're heading. Old Chinese proverb. If you want something different, you've got to think differently. From the realization that that's where the power is. I've got to know my thoughts have power. I've got to recognize the power of consciousness as being the only power that matters because it's the only one I can have anything to do with. And that my consciousness is never dependent on the opinion of another. Somebody said to me, I'm surrounded by jerks. I said, well, that's what, you know what? They may not even be jerks. They may just be jerks around you. Because if that's your experience of them, as within, so without. You're receptive to their jerkiness. I guess it's jerkness would be more appropriate, right? Jerkiness is movement. Jerkness is just being a jerk, right? As one of my mentors, Lou Tice, used to say, people say, I just need to be authentic. He goes, no. First you got to do the inner work because you might just be an authentic jerk. First you got to heal the inner jerk, then be authentic. Fake it until then. Don't reveal your jerkness to the world. The world's got enough of that. But see, if you're surrounded by people that upset you and freak you out and piss you off, you've got to recognize that the law says that's what you're attracting from them. That's what you're receptive to from them. And if you don't change it, you will continue to get that from them. It has little, if anything, to do with them. Sorry, just the way it worked. Dr. Holmes says we should learn to control our thought processes and bring them into line with reality. Thought should tend more and more toward an affirmative attitude of mind that is positive, stable, and above all else toward a real unity with spirit that is already complete and perfect. That I begin with the basic understanding that I'm in a universe that is absolutely perfect. Nothing needs to be fixed. That's where I begin. But what about all that? That's all effect. All the stuff that you see out there that you don't like, that you see as wrong, is the effect of people not doing the first thing and saying the world's screwed up. Thinking that's just a reaction, not recognizing that when you say the world's screwed up, that's a creative thought that helps to make it more screwed up. It's saying I'm receptive to a screwed up world, and the universe always says, right you are. Have it. Here you go. There is so much good happening in this world that we just don't see. And don't blame the media, because they only put on what attracts enough eyeballs for the advertisers, and what attracts enough eyeballs in our current world is to scare the hell out of people. If the good news sold brought people to commercials, you'd get nothing but good news. It's the same phenomenon. We don't stop on the 405 to admire how well the traffic's flowing. We only stop when there's something wrong. Same thing. Same thing. To expect the media to do anything else but sell advertising in an economic society is to be unrealistic. To be unrealistic. And there's something in there about reality. But when I say in my own sphere of influence that the world's going to hell in a handbasket, I declare my receptivity to have that be part of my experience. And in doing that, I add to the problem. There was a book out once that said, the title of the book was You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. Wasn't a very good book, but it was a great title. It's truth. A negative thought is a luxury. A luxury in the sense of, what is a luxury? What is something that's luxury? It's something you don't need. You don't go to Walmart for luxuries. I don't know why you go to Walmart, but you don't go there for luxuries. You go there to buy cheap plastic crap that you need. But a luxury is something you clearly don't need. It's an indulgence. A negative, you never need a negative thought. Never, ever, 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 ever do you need a negative thought. Yet we indulge in them, don't we? Why, that dirty SOB. Will you wait? Will you wait until I get a chance to get back at them? And then we seek out our allies. Let's go to coffee. I got something I'm going to tell you. Why can't, and at that meeting where you're tearing people apart, you say, I don't know why people can't be nicer. Where does it begin? Well, I'm waiting for the world to improve before I do. Okay, that always works. True thought deals directly with first cause. First cause is spirit, one source, God, whatever term you want to use. And this science is the study of first cause, spirit, or the truth, that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff of intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself. The thing itself, which is the title of the first chapter in the textbook. You have one relationship that matters. It's your relationship with spirit. Everything else grows from that. All of your other relationships with yourself, with other people, all spring from your relationship with Source, which is another way of saying, what kind of world do you think you live in? Are you part of everything, or are you separate from it? And that basic idea, that basic concept, controls everything else. The first step of treatment is God is. Then you say something really wonderful about it. Big, powerful, joyous. And the second step of treatment is I am. I am one with that which I just declared. If you only get the first two steps of treatment right, you'll never need to treat for anything else again. God is, I am. That's it. Everything else is theory. Everything else is discussion. Everything else is simply effect. The effect of those first two statements. And how we hold them in ourselves as belief. And what the job of the world is to give you feedback on where you are. How you doing? God is, I am. So when you have an experience that go through the day, right? And you have some kind of a, crappy experience, and you have that experience, and then you increasingly crapify it by going into a whole thing, You go on an internal rant, or maybe an external rant. When that settles down, how am I doing? God is, I am. We were in Santa Monica last night. Had Dr. Ken Gordon was flying in and from LAX, and before he went to his hotel, we grabbed a dinner with him, and Keith Cox was with us. And we're at the parking garage getting ready to leave, and this car comes out of the parking garage, and there's a woman riding down in the right-hand lane with a little kid on the back of her bike, and she slams on the brakes for some reason to talk to somebody, and the guy coming out of the garage is looking back to see traffic, and he came within that close of her back tire of hitting her. And boy, did she go off on him. I mean, she was so angry, and so focused, and I can't repeat one word that she said, but she said many words. The child fell off the bike, about a 4-year-old, fell off the bike and was trying to get back on, and the mother is just screaming. I mean, she didn't even know the child was in the world at that point. Her brain had been hijacked. It's true, your reptilian brain, when something like that happens, hijacks the rest of the brain and takes over. Survival, fear, fight or flight. And she went into the maternal ferocity mode to the extent that she forgot where her kid was and there was traffic. And I went out and tried to pick up the bike and grab the kid, and then she turned around and gave me a look, and I said, okay, I'll go over here. And finally it got, but she, I mean, and then she kind of rides off, and the driver just pulls over, and he's like, what happened? He says, I didn't hit her. You know, he was clearly all shaken up. And we said, yeah, you came pretty close, you know. But that's what had happened. Her brain was hijacked. Now, that's going to happen from time to time. That was pretty significant, close call. You know, the cortisone and the adrenaline were flying. But how many of us go there because we feel slighted, or we didn't get the right change, or we have to wait too long in line, or there's too much traffic ahead of us? See, how many of us get hijacked on a much lower level of seriousness because we haven't trained our mind? God is, I am. God is, I am. That's the secret. Thank you. Namaste.